Hello class, it's Professor Streeter, and in this video I'm going to look at the materials I've laid out for you in the week 6 content module, including a virtual class activity that I've created for you today. We're going to be looking at theories of right and wrong starting this week, and I've shared a video giving you an overview of the slideshow. We're focusing on what's called divine command theory, which is the view that the source of our moral standards rests in God, or the will, or the law, or the attitudes of God. And the other theory of right and wrong that we'll look at is called natural law theory. And this is the view that our standards of right and wrong derive from facts about our human nature. If we understand human beings as having natural tendencies, then we can understand the rightness and the wrongness of our actions in relation to those natural tendencies. So those are the two ideas that we're focusing on. But let me put myself here and scroll down. This is an image of Greek philosophers who raised some of the foundational questions that we're considering this semester. This is a painting of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates down here, raising the big questions. The School of Athens. And one of the readings for this week is Plato and other Aristotle thinking through foundational questions about the source of our moral standards. So here's the slideshow you can watch that gives a more detailed overview of the themes from this week. And scrolling down here, in addition to looking at Schaeffer-Landau chapters 5 and 6, chapter 5 focuses on the relationship between morality and God, and chapter 6 focuses on the relationship between morality and human nature. There are 3 readings from the Ethical Life. Plato's Euthyphro, that's an excerpt from a longer dialogue in which Socrates is kind of interrogating his friend Euthyphro about his decision to prosecute his own father for murder. There's a real question about whether his father has committed murder, but there's also a question about whether Euthyphro is right as his son to prosecute him. And so Euthyphro defends the view that he's doing the right thing because the gods would approve of it, suggesting that the gods' approval is the measure of right and wrong. But Socrates raises questions about that. So that's a text that gives you an example of a divine command theory of ethics and an example of how to criticize or argue against that view. Both Aquinas and Aristotle developed different versions of what's called natural law theory. Aristotle is actually developing a different view, but it's based on a view of human nature, and that we begin by understanding human nature, and out of our understanding of human nature, we can derive our understanding of moral standards. So both Aquinas and Aristotle develop that view in different ways. Coming to the tasks for the week, again, if you haven't submitted your rough draft, there's still time to do so. You click here and that will take you to the folder. Quiz 3 is still available. If you click here, it's until tonight is, I think, the last night it's available, so you can go back and read Enoch's essay on why I am an objectivist about ethics. And there are 15 questions working through the argument that Enoch lays down. I plan to make some videos about these quizzes so that you can see the correct answers, and I can talk about why the answers are correct after you finish this 3rd quiz. And then coming back here then, as I said, there are many slideshows. If you click the week 6 course materials here, it takes you to, first, some really good Wi-Fi videos by different philosophers on this fundamental question: is God necessary for morality? The first part of the video develops an example from the book Huck Finn by Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and the example of Huck and his relationship with Jim. This is set during the antebellum South. So he makes friends with Jim, who's a slave, an enslaved person, and Huck struggles with the question of whether he should turn Jim in. And so from a conventional point of view, right, the laws of the land say that Huck should turn him in. Right? The customs and mores and laws of the antebellum South dictate that Huck should turn Jim in, but morality, his conscience, tells him that it would be wrong to turn Jim in. And so this raises a question about the difference between social mores and conventional laws and what's called morality with a big M. Where does morality come from? And you might think that God is necessary to understand the source and origin and nature of morality. And so the video begins with that idea, presenting what's attractive about that view. But the second video looks at some problems with that view and tries to show that morality, or the standards of morality, can be understood and applied, and they can guide us without reference to God. At least that's the argument that Darwall makes. Then thinking about human nature, I've shared a couple of views about human nature from Eastern philosophy, two Chinese philosophers. One defends the view that human nature is essentially bad, that we have bad tendencies, and so morality is about correcting for our bad natural tendencies, whereas Mengxi defends the opposite view, that we are by nature good, and so morality is about cultivating our natural tendencies toward the good. So think about that question on your own, right? Are we by nature good or bad, right? Is morality about correcting for our nature or cultivating our nature? Okay. And then, so here's the slideshow, and again, my overview of the slideshow, but also I made some videos about giving a reading of chapter 6 in Schaefer-Landau, giving a reading of particular passages in which he talks about natural law theory, and then I look at Aquinas, a good example of a natural law theorist, a medieval philosopher, a saint, the founder of Catholic doctrine. So he's applying ancient Greek ideas about human nature to a Christian or Catholic context and trying to understand morality as something that is derived from a nature that is a natural law that is put in us by God. Okay, so I give a reading of some of those passages. Okay. So coming back up here, going back to week 6, scrolling down. In addition to looking at those materials, there's a weekly discussion, and I've got it here, and give some background, putting into context where we've come from, looking at egoism as a threat to morality and relativism as a kind of threat to morality. And so now we're considering various ways of developing an account of the objectivity of morality, of what makes moral standards binding on us or authoritative over us, or how are we hooked by them, right? If they apply to us, why do they apply to us, right? Once we've eliminated the threat of egoism and relativism, now that becomes a question, like what is the basis of our moral standards? And so I'm asking you to consider one of these questions. Does morality depend on God or religion for its foundation? Why or why not? Or does morality depend on human nature for its foundation? If we think of moral standards as rooted in something, right? Does it have to be rooted in religion, or does it have to be rooted in human nature in some way? So take up a position on one or the other of those questions. That's our discussion topic for this week. And then remember, the homework is due this week. Here I've asked you to choose one of these essays that we've read and break down the argument using the template. So if you click here, it takes you to the folder, and you can find the template here. If you click the template here, I've asked you to give a skim and answer some questions based on your skim or your first read. And then on the second read of the text, break it down into sections and write a couple of sentences for each section, stating the main point of that section and the purpose of that section. Okay, so there's the template that you can use. And again, choose one of these essays to analyze. It's totally up to you which one you choose. And that's something to turn in this week. Okay. Before break. We're going on break, so I'm trying to make sure you get some work done before you then take a little bit of a rest. And then finally, today I've created a virtual class activity. We're not going to be meeting for class. but I would like you to think about some of the themes by going into this shared Google Doc that I've shared with you. So if it's in your email, it's in the announcements, but it's also here in the week 6 module. If you click here, here, I'll make this bigger. So again, after reading chapter 5 and 6 in the Fundamentals of Ethics, think about these questions. And they're somewhat personal, but then asking you to elaborate and connect a little bit to the reading. So do you believe in God? Right? What does that mean to you? How does your belief or lack of belief shape the way you live? Okay. Do you think there can be morality without God? This was one of the discussion questions. So if you've already written about it, you can share your thoughts again here. Why or why not? Why does morality depend on God, or why doesn't it? Would you describe yourself as religious? Why or why not? And what does that mean for you? And then that leads to this question: what's the relationship between morality and religion? So those are not the same question. You might think that that morality depends on God in some way, but not on religion. Right? It's just God must exist, but we don't have to practice any particular religion in order to understand morality. But you might think that morality and religion are really closely tied, or not very closely tied. So how would you describe the relationship between morality and religion? And try to be as descriptive as you can. Then the last two questions focus on human nature. What is human nature? What are we talking about when we talk about human nature? How would you describe it? What are some natural tendencies that we have, right? Is human nature good in the sense, like, are we by nature good? Is it morally good to follow your nature, or is it morally bad to follow your nature? Right? What do you mean by this, and why do you think it's true? Give some examples. So I'm hoping you can share your thoughts here in the Google Doc. You can see what other students are writing, and make sure to include your name when you type. Put your name, all right, write a real sentence. And then if you need more space, you can just click this and it gives you more space. It creates another row if you need to create a new row. Okay, so you just go in here and it boop, makes another row. Okay, so that's something to do this week, so I can sort of see what you're thinking about the relationship between morality and religion, and the relationship between human nature and morality. The last thing I want to say before ending this video, is we are getting ready for the midterm exam. And so between now and the end of break, so we're this week and then next week is break. But then when we come back from break, I will start distributing the midterm exam, and you'll have about a week to complete it. In order to prepare for the exam, just read everything that we've looked at up until this point in the semester. So you'll have an opportunity to choose what to focus on in the exam. You'll get to make some choices, but basically the format will be 8 short paragraphs, 4 paragraphs in response to particular passages from the readings in the Fundamentals of Ethics. So we've read chapters 1 through 8 in the Fundamentals of Ethics. That's Schaefer-Landau's The Fundamentals of Ethics. We've looked at chapters 1 through 8. Okay, so hedonism, happiness is happiness all that matters, getting what you want, problems for the desire theory, and then part 2, normative ethics, morality and religion, and natural law we read for this week, psychological egoism and ethical egoism. Those 8 chapters will definitely be on the exam. You'll have a chance to write about each of those 8 chapters, passages from each of them. Also chapter 19 on relativism. So there's 9 chapters from the Fundamentals of Ethics. You don't have to write about all of them, but you'll have to write about 4 of them. And then the ethical life, we have read part 1. And so that's chapters, in the ethical life, we've read part 1. That's the first 5 chapters. And we've read Plato and Aquinas and Aristotle for this week. So that's 3 more chapters. That's in part 2. And then we've read Midgley and Enoch and Hume from part 3, Metaethics. And then we read the essay by Broom on the environment. So those are all essays you could write about as well. Again, you'll have to choose 4 from the ethical life and 4 from the Fundamentals of Ethics. So that's 8 short paragraphs. And you'll have about a week to complete it. I'll talk about that more when we get back from break, but that's something you can do to prepare. Okay? That's all for now. And I will share this video. If you have questions for me this week, please send me an email. Okay, take care. Enjoy the break.